highlighting history of suburban Sydney with the St Peter's Cooks River History Group.
Our aim is to preserve and promote local history.
We are based at St Peter's in Sydney's inner west.
The southern Sydney seaside suburb of Kurranulla is located on a peninsula between the Pacific Ocean and Port Hacking. Its numerous surf beaches attract tourists and Sydney residents.
In 1796, George Bass, Matthew Flinders and a boy, William Martin, explored and mapped the coastline. They named Port Hacking after Henry Hacking, a Port Jackson pilot. Bass and Flinders Point, the southernmost point of the peninsula, is named in their honour.
Robert Dixon surveyed the area in 1827-28, naming the beach Karranulla, the Dharawal word meaning a place of small pink shells.
Between 1861 and 1875, Thomas Holt acquired 12,000 acres of land which included the Cronulla district. He built Sutherland House, a mansion overlooking Gunnamatta Bay. He established oyster farms in Gunnamatta and Weenie Bays.
For many years the region was only accessible by punt across the Georges River from Tom Ugley's Point, replaced by Tom Ugley's Bridge.
A rail line to Sutherland was opened in 1885. Cronulla beach areas became popular with day trippers. Many regulars rented houses every year for holidays.
The coming of the railway began an era of coach services. The Giddings family ran horse-drawn coaches between Cronulla and Sutherland. At one time they had 5 coaches and 56 horses.
In 1888, the first commercial hotel, the Oriental, was built to serve the needs of tourists and visitors. It was bought by Albert Giddings and renamed the Cronulla Beach Hotel. The building burnt to the ground in 1903 and was rebuilt the following year. In 1922, it was redecorated and refurbished. It was replaced by Northies Hotel, which still occupies the site today.
A post office, residence and telephone exchange, built in 1924, replaced a 1900 building.
In 1895, Crown land was advertised for sale. 4 years later, the government proclaimed the village of Gunnamatta, which means sandy hills. At that time, a place with few permanent residents and visited by holidaymakers.
In 1908, the name was officially changed to Cronulla. Gunnamatta was used for the name of the bay on the western side of the peninsula.
A single-track steam tram operated between Sutherland and Cronulla from 1911. It was replaced in 1939 by the electric railway.
Cronulla Railway Station has the second longest platform in New South Wales. Cronulla Beach is the only one in the metropolitan area serviced by rail.
The early 1900s saw residential subdivision. Surfing, fishing and a healthy environment were promoted.
The Cronulla Fisheries Centre was established at Hungry Point. The hatchery, experimental pool and laboratory were built in 1904. 2 years later it became fully operational. Today the site is a public reserve and marine rescue base.
The original Cronulla School of Arts was completed in 1907. A new building adjacent to it was officially opened in 1913. It had a library, billiard hall, and hosted meetings, concerts and social events.
In 1946, the Cronulla School of Arts Dramatic Society was established. It became the Cronulla School of Arts Theatre Group in 1958.
In the early 1960s, the billiard hall was closed. The library moved across the road to the 1908 Methodist Church building, which today is used for commercial purposes.
Located near the post office and Mrs Giddings' store, Cronulla Hall was for sale in 1910. It was purchased by the Anglican Church. The first service was held there in 1912. The council purchased the land in 1919 and the building was moved to Ocean Grove Avenue, where it was used as the parish hall from 1935 until 1961. In that year, its final move was to Kurranulla, where it became St James Church.
Today's St Andrew's Church was built in 1935. Its Byzantine architecture was unusual in Australia. It became known amongst the local community as the Elephant House, comparing it to the most well-known domed building at that time, the Elephant House at Taronga Park Zoo.
The Cronulla Surf Lifesaving Club, established in 1907, was one of the first surf clubs in Australia. The original clubhouse was a tram carriage. Today, it is a 1940 Art Deco building. Other surf clubs were formed at North Cronulla, Wanda and Allura.
In 1910, men's and ladies' dressing sheds were built at Cronulla Beach. These were replaced in the late 1930s.
The wharf at Gunnamatta Bay was known as the Hospital Bay Wharf, built for taking quarantine cases from coastal vessels. The Cronulla to Bundeena ferry service commenced in 1915. The Karranulla is the oldest commuter ferry still operating in Sydney.
The Kurranulla Ocean Wharf at Salmon Hall Reserve near the entrance to Port Hacking opened in 1919. The ferry service found it difficult to reach the wharf. The service was abandoned in 1924.
Cecil Munro took over Mob's real estate located in Gerald Street in 1918. A short distance away he built his own premises, Munro Flats, beside Cronulla Park and overlooking the ocean. The terracotta brick building also featured a fish and oyster bar. Munro's flats were remodelled to become the Hotel Cecil in 1927. In 1936 the hotel was taken over by Tooth and Company. During the Second World War, the hotel was used to aid defence forces. It provided accommodation for troops and an RAAF school of technical training. After the war, it continued as a place for local entertainment. The ballroom closed in the late 50s. The hotel was demolished and the Cecil Apartments opened in 1988. Part of the facade was retained as a connection with the old hotel.
The Cronulla Children's Home, established in 1916, became Cowley House in 1946. It was a Sydney City Missions holiday home at Cronulla. It was closed and sold in 1976.
A private home built in the early 1920s became the Eleanor McKinnon Memorial Home. From 1951 until 1997, it was run by the Red Cross as a home for children who were experiencing health problems or whose families were suffering a crisis. It was named after Eleanor McKinnon, founder of the Junior Red Cross. Today it is part of Palm Springs Over 55's Villa Complex.
Cronulla War Memorial was erected in 1923. Originally it stood near the intersection of Kurranulla Street and the Kingsway. It became a traffic hazard and was relocated to Monroe Park, opposite the railway station, in 1940.
Cronulla Golf Club officially opened in 1923. Prior to this, golf was played from the Cronulla Hotel, down and across Allura Road and back along the beach side of the road. 45 acres of land was purchased to build a 9-hole golf course, with a clubhouse in the form of a large cottage. In the early 1940s, 50 acres of swampland adjoining its boundaries was purchased and rezoned to extend the course. The clubhouse was rebuilt and extended in 1969 and the original cottage used as a function room. In 2014, a $4 million clubhouse renovation project was completed.
The Cronulla Theatre opened in 1928. In the 1950s it was taken over by Greater Union Theatres and renamed the Odeon. Subsequently it was independently operated. The main entrance was moved from Cronulla Street onto the Kingsway. It was known as Event Cronulla when taken over by Hoyts in 2019, then refurbished during 2020.
Joe Santa Maria bought Whitby Cliff's restaurant rooms and renamed them Joe's Milk Bar. It operated for nearly 50 years until gutted by fire in 1995.
At the end of 1941, preparations were made in anticipation of an enemy invasion along Sydney's coastline. Along the beach from Boat Harbour to Oak Park, steel posts and barbed wire were erected. The Volunteer Defence Corps took over the surf and dressing pavilions.
After World War II, the population increased. In the 1950s, many of the guest houses were replaced by blocks of flats.
Legendary Hawaiian surfer and Olympic medal-winning swimmer Duke Kanahanamoku had visited Cronulla in 1915 and gave an exhibition of surfboard riding. It was not until the 1950s that the popularity of surfboard riding evolved. Board riding clubs were formed in the following decade.
Local surfboard builders kept the surfers well equipped.
In January 1965, the bodies of two 15-year-old girls were found in the sandhills just off Wanda Beach. The case remains one of Australia's most notorious unsolved crimes.
Sand mining sites are today the heritage-listed Cronulla sand dune and Wanda Beach coastal landscape. The desert atmosphere attracted filmmakers. In 1941, the Charles Travell movie 40,000 Horsemen was filmed there. The site was used as a backdrop for The Rats of Tobruk and more recently Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. The dunes now lie between a housing estate and industrial buildings.
In 1965, St Aloysius Church replaced an earlier building.
The main shopping street was closed in 1988 to create a plaza. The clock tower in the plaza was a bicentennial gift to the people of the Sutherland Shire from the Caltex oil refinery. The tower houses the oldest public clock in Australia, built in England in 1770, the year James Cook landed at Kurranulla.
In 2005, the Cronulla riots injured dozens of people.
Cronulla Beaches became the first national surfing reserve dedicated in Sydney.
Bronze plaques along the Cronulla Surfing Walk of Fame honour local surfing champions.
Today, the beautiful stretches of sand and famous surf beaches remain an iconic location. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to our channel. It's free. Coming soon, the original municipality of Concord, which included the suburbs of Cabarita, Concord, Concord West, Liberty Grove, Mortlake, North Strathfield and Rhodes. And check out our website, stpeterscooksriverhistory.wordpress.com.